Mac here with you on Birds 365. The week after free agency hit. It's still ongoing, and Eagles still need to do some things, but they've done plenty already. Here to give us the insight on what he thinks he's done is our buddy Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer and WIP. Marcus, we were talking about the Haason Reddick news that broke last night. Give Jeremy Fowler from ESPN credit. They pushed back a bonus to the end of the month so as to probably try and continue to facilitate a trade. Haason Reddick was Haason Reddick. If we assume Haason Reddick will be an ex-Eagle before April 1st, was he out the door when he came to an agreement with the Eagles that he was going to try and find a trade partner? Was he out the door the day they signed Bryce Huff, or was he out the door last week when Josh Sweat decided to redo his contract and settled for 1 year? When should we have seen the writing on the wall?
Well, I'm not sure he's out the door. I mean,
you're still a believer, huh? Good for you.
Well, I mean, if he's willing to rework his deal, I mean, the issue isn't, can he get traded? There are 31 teams who would trade for him. Is he willing to be traded and agree to a restructured or a new contract with a new team? And what's the compensation versus the outlay? Haason Reddick is not as valuable an overall player as, say, Brandon Graham in his prime. He gets more sacks, but he doesn't set the edge. He doesn't stop the run. Brandon Graham was an elite defensive end for a long time. So I don't know that the market is as robust as Haason Reddick and his agents thought so. That said, you're going to have a hard time finding a better situation than you have in Philadelphia for the next 2 years, especially considering they stockpile defensive ends. So as much as he's played last year, he probably won't play as much going forward with Bryce Huff in the fold. So, yeah, I don't believe the Eagles want to get rid of him. I don't believe they think that he's worth the cap hit that he would incur this year. But if I'm not mistaken, they're in the same situation with Darius Slay last year.
Yeah.
Haason Reddick's got a lot more rubber on his tires than Darius had at that point. They like Haason Reddick. They think he's a good player. They wish he was better at certain things. So, but if we do take your assumption into hand, I guess he was out the door at the end of the season. Haason Reddick held a very long, very involved post-game press conference in Tampa. It was essentially, either they're going to extend me or I'm gone press conference. And anybody who was there for it understood. He was literally the last guy out of the locker room.
Yeah, last one.
Right. So, and I asked him on the way to the food line, I said, the buffet, the buffet they get before they go on the plane. I asked him, I said, are you going to hold out? He's like, no, I'm not going to hold out. I'm not going to do that. Then he said, well, I don't want to think about that stuff right now. And I was like, we talked some more and I might write about it. But this was always in his mind, and I'm not sold that. I don't think he would mind leaving, but I think they would be disappointed if they didn't retain him.
Yeah, it's complicated because now Hupp is here, and you mentioned Darius Slay. I compared the two situations a little bit, Marcus. Now, last year the Eagles kind of decided, well, we can keep two of the three defensive backs. At the time, it was Slay, it was Bradbury, it was C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and then they toggled back and forth. At first, they wanted to keep Slay and C.J., then they couldn't work things out with C.J., and it turned into Bradbury all of a sudden agreed to a more cost-effective deal than they thought he would, and all of a sudden it became Bradbury and C.J., and then all of a sudden Slay agrees to a renegotiation, and it ends up being Slay and Bradbury, and C.J.'s out the door. Luckily, he's back as a playmaker. We'll talk about that. But here now you have Hupp introduced. Now, they didn't have all three at the time, but now they have all three in the offseason. And Hupp's making $17 million. You've already renegotiated with Josh Sweat, who is kind of in the Slay mode. He took a little bit less than I think we all expected, but he's over $10 million, could be up to $13 million. And then you have Haason, who wants more and should have more, to be honest, if you look at his standing in the rest of the league and where the market is, should be up in the 20 million category. Can you pay, even with the bloated salary cap and the large increase, can you afford to pay 3 guys 10 million plus? And, oh, by the way, Howie Roseman's out there saying, we got to get Nolan Smith involved. And we still got BG, Old Faithful, Old Reliable. How much is too much? Or is anything too much?
No, nothing's too much. This is defensive end heaven. I mean, you can't, if you can rush the passer, you can have a slot. They carry 5 defensive ends. They rotate them. Brandon Graham plays defensive tackle, a third of his 15 snaps. So, yeah, I mean, there's no reason these guys can't coexist. Yeah, it's a splurge, but they always splurge on the defensive line. They don't splurge anywhere else. You can argue they splurge on the offensive line, but what they tend to do on the offensive line is they lock up guys like Landon Dickerson as early as possible, so their deal is much more digestible down the road. You know, you can argue that the Eagles' elite offensive line has been marginally underpaid for 10 years because they keep giving them guaranteed money earlier and the gambles pay off. You know, I mean, if you look at what Jason Kelce has earned, you look at what Lane Johnson has earned compared to what they, how they played, they probably, took a 5 to 10% pay cut for that security. That said, they love defensive ends. They like defensive tackles, but they love defensive ends.
If you guys are right that they are going to retain Hassan Reddick, basically what it comes down to is Huff in and Barnett out, because they had 5 guys last year at the start of the season, and Derek Barnett was the 5th, or at least he was in my book. So you're putting in Bryce Huff for Derek Barnett. That's pretty damn good upgrade. Expensive one, but Bryce Huff will be much better getting to the quarterback than Derek Barnett. All right. John and I talked about this top of the show in the last couple of days when we knew that the Eagles had traded for their new backup quarterback. I thought Kenny Pickett did a nice job ingratiating himself with the Philadelphia fan base and the media yesterday. Seems like a bright guy and handles his business well. If they have to put him in a game, will he be better than Marcus Mariota this year? Marcus,
I'd say they're about the same. They're very different quarterbacks, but I think you get about the same from them. And let's be honest. I mean, this offensive line and these weapons, Mac and Mac could alternate series and wind up with 100 passes. I mean, this is an incredibly stacked offense. The only caveat is, how does the offensive line function in the absence of Jason Kelce? But we have to figure that out at some point. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I would have rather seen Justin Fields, if only because the offensive line and the receivers, but the offensive line in particular, gets used to blocking for Jalen Hurts. It's a hard thing to do, to block for Jalen Hurts, because his habits are not typical quarterback habits. And even breaking the pocket, especially last year, he was very, very unique. I think Justin Fields replicates Jalen Hurts better than Kenny Pickett. And I don't know if that's a huge deal, but for me, it would be, very important. But really, all you have to do is sort of manage the game and hope the defense doesn't give up 40.
And I think Kenny Pickett could be a good game manager, but you said something interesting there about the weapons, and I agree with you with the weapons, and Saquon Barkley's a part of that. But even pre-Saquon Barkley, they had significant weapons with DeAndre Swift. And if Mac and Mac can line up with this group and produce, why the heck are they paying a running back over $13 million, Marcus? Why the sea change?
Well, I think they coveted him. I think they've always liked Saquon Barkley. And for all of their professed originality, quarterback factory, gold standard, the Eagles copy. They're a copycat team. Yeah. At first they copied Dallas, then they copied New England, and now they're copying San Francisco and Christian McCaffrey / Deebo Samuel. People forget Deebo Samuel is a sort of a four-pronged weapon himself.
Yeah.
So I think they see that in Saquon Barkley more than anybody else that they've been able to get their mitts on since LaShawn McCoy. I mean, if you remember, LaShawn McCoy was one of the closest things to Marshall Faulk that we've seen, where not only could he line up as a receiver, but he could come out of the backfield, catch the ball, and was a touchdown threat. I will contend with Orlando Pace and Isaac Bruce and I think Torrey Holt and Kurt Warner on that team, by far the best player on the greatest show on turf, the guy that made
I agree with you.
Was Marshall Faulk.
Yeah.
Right. So if they can get a Marshall Faulk type entity, it opens up everything else. And let's be honest, AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith weren't that open this year. And Jalen had time. And I think they weren't that open is because nobody was scared of DeAndre Swift taking it to the house. He made some nice runs. He's a good running back. But unlike Miles Sanders and unlike LaShawn McCoy, there was no big play threat in DeAndre Swift to that degree. And now with Saquon Barkley, you have that back.
I think you're selling DeAndre a little short, but that's okay.
I mean, where were his breakout plays? I mean, 15 yards versus 50. I mean, that's what we're talking about with Miles and LaShawn. DeAndre, he's a nice back. He's a good player, but he's not that kind of threat. And defenses did not key on him. If you look at the safety play, where the safeties' eyes would go when Miles Sanders and LaShawn McCoy were on the field, it was a different matter. And Miles wasn't as good as LaShawn, but he was a lot better.
Yeah, but he was a home run hitter at times. He had the one season where he had 3 runs over 70 yards. So
yeah,
was it 3 or 4? But that real quick to follow up on that, because I agree with you. I'm 100% with you. The Eagles are trying to copy the 49ers. So, and you brought up Marshall Faulk, who is somebody I talk about all the time as well. Is Saquon Barkley closer? This is my problem. I think it's an evaluation problem. Is Saquon Barkley closer to McCaffrey and Faulk or closer to DeAndre Swift? I would lean towards the latter. I'm sorry. Maybe rookie Saquon Barkley before the ACL, before the 1,500 touches on that crappy turf at MetLife Stadium, half of them, which tears up your body to a ludicrous degree. Is he Christian McCaffrey? Because the Eagles seem to think so, or the closest, as you described it, the closest thing to. I just don't see that player when I see him play.
He's the closest thing that they can get. There are other backs out there that are probably better and more valuable and maybe more dangerous than Saquon Barkley at this point. But again, the Giants' offensive line, there was an era that you guys lived through where the Eagles' offensive line was a story every week and every day if you wanted to. Like, I'm a pretty good sports writer about the offensive line because of Barrett Brooks and, what was the guy's name? Guy McIntyre. They got Guy McIntyre.
Great player.
Yeah,
it was
that
great.
That was an upgrade when they got Guy McIntyre.
Yeah.
Until they drafted Trey Thomas and signed John Runyon, this offensive line was a disaster.
Yeah,
and they were unlucky. They had some bad. So my point being, the offensive line with the Giants has gone through a 10-year era, an 8-year era, where it's the story every week. So Saquon Barkley succeeded in spite of that offensive line and in spite of not having a real quarterback. So I don't know, John, you might be right. Maybe there's not a lot of tread left on that tire, but what he's done with what he had to work with in his first 6 years, 4 1,300-yard rushing seasons, he's sniffing 2,000 yards all purpose every year. I would like to see that for a couple of years. I would make that gamble.
Yeah, that's why I was very bullish on the signing. I'm going to attribute a lot of Saquon's not having a repeat of his rookie year to the fact that the Giants just went backwards all the way around him. Offensive line got worse. Eli Manning retired. Danny Dimes and Tommy Cutlets. Yeah, I'll give him a new reevaluation stage here behind the Eagles' offensive line and Jalen Hurts as his quarterback. Do want to get back to the defensive line. I should ask you this before when you're talking about it, mentioning Hassan Reddick, that Brandon Graham in his prime was probably a more valuable player because he did more than just rush the quarterback, that he set the edge. He was stout against the run. That's not Hassan's strong suit. They paid $17 million for Bryce Huff. And his 4 years in the league, granted, undrafted, had to work his way into the Jet lineup. Last year played more, but again, less than 50%, basically in on passing downs. Is $17 million the going rate for a guy just to rush the quarterback? Because that's all I know that Bryce Huff can do at this time. Are the Eagles betting on Bryce Huff on the come without knowing whether he can be the type of defensive end that you described when you talked about Brandon Graham?
Well, I mean, it's I'm glad you qualified it the way you did. We don't know he can rush the passer. We know he rushed the passer 1 year. That, of all the things they've done this offseason, good and, sort of like cutting fat guys, the most remarkable thing is they bet $17 million that Bryce Huff isn't an undrafted free agent flash in the pan. I was astonished that they went that hard after that guy and with that kind of bullishness. Now, you can argue that, 2 years ago, we were kind of saying the same thing about Hassan Reddick, right? Nobody was really sure. And that's why there wasn't a huge market for Hassan Reddick. He's been vastly underpaid for 2 years, considering what he's done and what he did. So Howie was right about that. But Howie's been wrong about a lot of defensive ends. He's been very bullish on guys like Vinny Curry. He drafted Marcus Smith. He's done a lot. He thinks he's like a defensive end whiz, and he's going to outfox the market. And sometimes he does, but mostly he doesn't. So, to answer your question, I would not have spent $17 million on Bryce Huff. And I'm not sure that they weren't bidding against themselves to some degree.
Boy, I don't know, Marcus. There were a lot of teams interested in Bryce Huff, but I would argue, isn't that what free agency is about? He's a projection, no question about it. He's not a proven player, but he's coming off his rookie deal. You think there's room for improvement. I was, maybe the greatest free agent signing in recent Eagles history is Brandon Brooks. Nobody thought Brandon was going to turn into the best right guard in football when he arrived from Houston. He was a good player, but wasn't great. And all of a sudden, here he comes, gets with Jeff Stoutland. The rest is history until the injuries crop up. Malcolm Jenkins, who was the safety? I always forget the safety Eagles fans wanted that year. You guys remember?
It's the guy that went to New Orleans.
Yeah. Yes. Jerry Spurd, right?
Yeah, Jerry Spurd. I think he got hurt, right? Bird got hurt.
Yeah, he got hurt. He was a good player, but everybody was criticizing the Malcolm signing. Oh, they got just a guy. He played corner. He came out as a corner.
Yeah.
And we all know Malcolm's one of the great players in Eagles history, great defensive players. Isn't that what free agency is about? Like evaluating and trying to find that untapped potential?
Absolutely. But Malcolm had way more.
Yeah, he did.
Malcolm had way more pedigree, and so did Brandon Brooks. Had way more pedigree than Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff has 10 sacks in 1 year, and he's been in the league for 4. Yeah. So I think he had 7.5 in the first 3. So I mean, look, God bless Howie Roseman and Bryce Huff. I don't wish any ill on either one of them. I just thought it was I would say it's a bigger gamble than Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, same here. I said the same thing, and I watch a lot of Jet games as a Jet guy, and he's got a good get off, but I watched them run right behind him when he's going wide outside. I don't know if you heard me say this. It's really ticked off Eagle fans. I compared him to Jason Babin.
I was just going to say that.
Jason Babin. Yep. Great at rushing the pass, and people forget how good, because it went so badly in his second year they had to release him, and people forget he had 18 sacks his first year.
Yeah.
He made second team All Pro.
Oh, yeah.
He was
He could get
phenomenal
to
his
the
first
quarterback.
year. And then like a house of cards, it all came down.
Now, Marcus was there for Jason Babin. I've heard. I wasn't there. I've heard he's a bit of a dick, to be kind. That now Bryce Huff I've only met once. He seems like a really, really good dude. So I think that part of it's going to change. Jason Babin's the only guy in the world who doesn't like Jason Kelsey, as far as I know.
Well,
So
I will say
that might have been part of the problem.
I will say this: like Kelsey has very little use for, and this was a young Jason Babin. He's probably a very different person right now, but he was kind of a blowhard. And the remarkable thing about him, and I hope this isn't inappropriate, is
nothing's inappropriate here.
I think he spent almost all his time. He was very well built, and he spent almost all his time in the locker room without his shirt on. You just don't do that. Dudes just don't do that, and he did it every day. And he had these, some and this was what 15 years ago, 10 years ago. He had a remarkable array of tattoos, and he was just a kind of a showy guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. Football players generally don't hang out with their shirts on, and Jason Babin was addicted to it.
And I'm not trying to make any aspersions about Mr. Huff and his personality and his locker room behavior. I'm just comping the potential on-field comparison that they're both really good speed pass rushers from the outside. Lend a hand with the run. Yeah, we don't know if they have any chance to achieve it.
Jason Babin got targeted,
Oh, yeah.
Hassan Reddick gets targeted. Josh Sweat gets targeted like all the time. And until their defensive tackles wore out, they were running around the outside. And then when Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter kind of gave out gas, they said, we don't have to do that anymore. We'll just go up the middle.
I, don't want to overly state the way guys do their business. I think what your role in the locker room is important, not as important as it is on the field. But I'd forgotten how entertaining CJGJ could be. 1 year out of the mix, and you forgot how entertaining he was when he returned to talk to you guys the other day. Here's what I came away with, and this is just my own personal evaluation. If it's wrong, I apologize. If it's unfair, I apologize. I think the guy's just a goof. I don't think he's a diva. I don't think he's a bad dude. I don't think he's an ego-driven guy. Well, maybe a little ego-driven. He put himself on.
There's some ego. There's some ego.
I just think he's a goof. I think he's kind of detached from the way most 20-something-year-olds look at life, handle their life, and the like. They have a new defensive coordinator, some changes on the defensive staff. Are they going to, the new Eagles defensive staff, going to be able to focus CJGJ to keep him on the straight and narrow and the guy who was the great playmaker 2 years ago when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl?
I'll say this. I'm going to be fascinated to see the CJ Gardner-Johnson / Vic Fangio dynamic, because Vic Fangio doesn't deal with goofs. And no, he wasn't a goof. He all
right, then do me a favor. Give me the Marcus. I gave you my Dr. Phil evaluation. Give me the Marcus Hayes, CJGJ personality, fitting in with his teammates, working with coaches evaluation.
I used to term brash, Marcus. I think he's brash, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, especially when you're on the field.
They had to have a meeting with CJGJ before he entered the locker room last time. And apparently there were conversations about his attitude and his professionalism before he entered the locker room this time. So that's not me saying this is what I saw. This is me saying this is what they did. That's not a goof. CJGJ was at the Super Bowl, was walking around with a selfie stick, recording himself during the media availabilities, and from what I heard, pretty much all the time. So again, to each his own. He can play football when he's healthy. He's a really good player. But to diminish the personality issues is I think certainly unwise. And let's be honest, he gave a 12-minute press conference. 6 minutes of it was about him not being a distraction anymore, growing up, maturing. So if he's addressing his own, sort of self-evaluation and maturity, whether he was talking about, the negotiations last year, being in a locker room, all this sort of self-awareness he has now, he had a lot to be self-aware about. So no, he wasn't a goof. And yeah, he was brash, but he was brash and dismissive. He was brash and sort of egocentric. So again, like I said,
Yeah.
I hope it's a different CJGJ. I think it needs to be for him to get the most out of himself and for the Eagles to get the most out of him.
And it's always a cost benefit. I think the Eagles saw the playmaking ability when he was healthy, as you mentioned, and they saw the defense without that playmaking ability, said, let's give this another shot. You brought up Vic Fangio, and I think you're right. Vic's known as a very old school, discipline. You got to play your role, sort of almost the Patriots way, do your job type of thing. Don't be freelancing. Now you have CJ. You also have Devin White, tremendously talented linebacker from a physical standpoint. And we know this team doesn't get linebackers. You talk about pedigree. This was the 5th overall pick in the draft, Marcus. I've talked to multiple people from Tampa who watched him play for 5 years. Every single one of them. He's a great athlete, and then comes the snowball down the hill of defenses. He overruns. He does. This, to me, with Vic Fangio, looks like a budding disaster. Is this just panic? We need something with some ability at linebacker.
Yeah, I believe they think they have a window in which they can win, right? So if you draft a linebacker in the 2nd round, say, he's going to make so many mistakes that you're probably not going to be able to win with him, especially if he's playing next to Nakobe Dean, who has all of 5 starts in his career. So Nakobe's going to be making real-time mistakes. There's a difference between making a mistake and trying to make a play. Devin White doesn't make mistakes. He tries to make plays, which isn't always the best strategy. But when the Bucs defense was really, really good, they could cover for that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the market tells you what a guy is. And I'm a little bit less concerned with his freelancing than I am with his diminished physical abilities. I'm not sure that there's a lot of tread left on that tire. So between the two, I don't have a problem with the signing. It's not was it $7 million?
No, it's $4 million, really.
$4 million. So
the real
I don't
number.
have a huge problem with the signing and the outlay, but I think the market tells you what to expect from him, and that's fine. I mean, he's had a good career so far. There's only so many plays you can make, and it is remarkable. I will say this about CJGJ. He isn't nearly as reckless as he is accused of being. You know what I'm saying? He's reckless for a safety, but he's not nearly as reckless as he's accused of being. And, dirty little secret, Brian Dawkins was extremely reckless.
Guys who make plays
you got to take chances to make plays.
Right,
exactly.
So if you're on a defense and you're making plays and you're reckless, you get away with it. And God bless him, but Brian Dawkins went off script a lot. Troy Polamalu made a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I don't, CJGJ, and again to kind of your point earlier, Jody, CJGJ has a profile where if he doesn't do everything by the book, it's magnified. And, a lot of guys, I can't remember. I was trying to remember who I was talking to last year during an Eagle who played with a great player. Like one one of the Watt brothers and one of the Bosa brothers. And he said, well, I played behind this guy. This is going to be easy playing behind these guys because they don't nearly go off nearly as much. I think it happens a ton defensively, and we just don't see it. And we are so enamored of big plays by good guys that we don't give it as much attention as it probably otherwise would get.
Marcus, I'm going to give you a read that I have, a concern I have about the Eagles and the moves they made this offseason, specifically on one side of the ball, specifically on one aspect of playing defense. The Eagles' additions on defense this year all seem to be better going forward, going downhill. That Huff is a guy who we know can get after the quarterback, and CJ, GJ, 6 interceptions, going to be a playmaker, going to come up with INTs here, better against the pass. Devin White, the strength to his game is going forward and potentially getting sacks. Even a guy like Zach Bond, who they say is a tweener, plays both linebacker and edge. He didn't really play until he got to the edge, and they said, get downfield. Trust the quarterback there, big guy, and he did a pretty good job of it. All of the Eagle additions are better at the quarterback, getting to the QB, running down quarterbacks. I'm going to use a Johnny Mackism here. Nobody cares about stopping the run until they have to stop the run. Then it becomes a problem. Is stopping the run going to be a problem for the Eagles again this year?
As I've said since the overtime game they won against Buffalo, everything depends on how Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter play.
Yeah.
You draft them, you move up to draft each of them, and not necessarily just stop the run, but to be foundational franchise players for 10 to 15 years. They drafted 2 Fletcher Coxes. And maybe you get one out of the 2 to be Fletcher Cox. But you can't draft those guys that high and then have to support them. Now, Milton Williams has a hand in this as well. He's a 3rd-round pick entering his 3rd or 4th year. He has to play better as well. But those 2 guys are kind of the be-all and end-all. They're the first down defensive tackles who have to make it 2nd and long or 2nd and mid-long. So you're right, Jody. Everything they did is to facilitate pressuring the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But none of it matters if the middle is soft.
At Inkstained Wretch, one of my favorite Twitter handles ever. X handles, tremendous. Marcus Hayes, Inquirer.com. You wrote about the foundation, right, of Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis.
I actually had to get permission, right? So my boss is we're talking about what the topic is going to be. Excuse me, on one of these days, and like Mike Sealski and Dave Murphy are the columnists.
Yeah.
Dave the Phillies, and Mike was covering college basketball. So, one of the things I pride myself on is versatility. I was like, what do you want me to write about? It seems like Eagles talk is still, whatever. And he was like, yeah, I'd love you to write about the defense. I was like, well, my observation on the defense is none of this stuff matters unless the defensive tackles play to their pedigree. But I've written that a lot. And he's like, you have written it a lot, but go ahead and write it again. And it did fine. But
by the way, I agree with you. I've said to Jody, the foundation of this defense has to be built on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. Has to be.
I would say this. The foundation of the Eagles for the last 12 years was built around Fletcher Cox.
Yeah.
Period.
Yes.
Jason Kelsey's been great. Lane Johnson's been great. You've had good quarterback play. Their most consistent player around who they built all of their defenses was Fletcher Cox. He's been the constant.
Well, Marcus,
a pretty good leader.
Marcus, I haven't talked to you since Fletcher's retirement. I made the argument that you put the Mummers outfit on Fletcher Cox, you give him the podcast, you give him the personality. People recognize he's the better Eagle. Jason Kelsey's phenomenal. Jason Kelsey, I'm not criticizing Jason Kelsey. He's a Hall of Fame player. For some reason, Fletcher Cox is not thought of the way he should be. This is one of the great players in franchise history. Agree with me or disagree with me?
I more than agree with you. The best player in the last 12 years in Philadelphia, the best athlete was Claude Giroux. And it wasn't close. He was just the best. I mean, it's a long time, but it was Claude Giroux. The second best player and the second most valuable player is Fletcher Cox. And again, I don't think it's particularly close. And it's a long time. It's 10, 12 years. But he showed up all the time. He was elite for 6 or 7 of those years. And he was the player around whom 2 Super Bowl defenses were built. They went twice with Fletcher Cox.
Yeah. He was the best player on the only Super Bowl team. The best player on the only Super Bowl team in Eagles history.
And it's not close, and it's not debatable. He was
hold on a second there. So are you going to call the Hall of Fame selection writers, the 50 guys who were tasked with putting guys into the Hall of Fame, the highest honor that you can possibly get in the National Football League? When they put Jason Kelce in and don't put Fletcher Cox in, will they be idiots because they've left out the best player in the Eagles over the last decade, according to Marcus Hayes, and it isn't even debatable?
Well, I would say that Fletcher Cox, at his peak, was more valuable than Jason Kelce. And Jason Kelce has probably been elite longer than Fletcher Cox, but I would say it's probably easier to be elite at a position where you don't have somebody over your head every time, as opposed to being elite.
Whoa. What do you mean don't have somebody over your head every time? He's playing center. Of course it's somebody over his head every play.
You need to watch some center play.
By the way, Jason Kelce would agree with Marcus and I.
Right.
Jason Kelce would be the first one to tell you. I mean, and he's not being self-deprecating. Jason said there's 2 players I played with that would have been successful regardless of coaching scheme, and that was Jason Peters and Fletcher Cox. That's it. Everybody else
argue that Jason Peters is the second best Eagle in that time span. I mean, Jason Kelce is a really good player. Yeah. Lane Johnson's better than him. Jason Peters is better than him. Fletcher Cox is better than him.
Yeah, I'm just.
And Jason Peters, a lot of people, he's hurt himself by hanging on for so long, but he was. I mean, Jason Kelce retired. They still talk with Marcus knows every single one of those offensive linemen that played with Jason Peters talk about him like he's some mythical figure.
Jason Peters
with such reverence.
Jason Peters used to do his warm-ups and drills with the linebackers. I mean, he was just an absolute freak, freak. And for a 5-year period, Fletcher Cox was one of the 3 best defensive tackles in football in an era of spectacular defensive tackles. I mean, he's just so good. And the last 3 years, he hasn't been nearly as good, but he's been very good.
And he's still been very good. And Jody agrees.
I said he was the most consistent Philadelphia Eagle defender this year. Consistent. Yeah. He might not have been the best, but you're talking about down in, down out, game in, game out. He's still their most consistent player, and man, are they going to miss him?
Who's that, Fletcher?
Yeah, Fletcher.
Fletcher was not good after he hurt himself against Buffalo. He hurt that groin, and he was the last 7 games after Buffalo. Yeah, he was
but remember what we're talking about, the Eagle defense that fell apart. I'll tell you, he fell apart less than a whole bunch of other players on that Eagle defense. I'll still call him the most consistent. All right, want to wrap on this note, and this is for both of you, Marcus, you first. Was there a Kellen Moore sighting at the NovaCare complex when you were down there for any of your get to know the newest Eagle press gatherings? Do we know that he exists? Are we positive that he's actually breathing and upright these days? Because the Eagles haven't seen fit to make him available to any of the media outlets.
To make available either. That's just the way the Eagles do. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with it.
I will say, I was embedded with the Cowboys twice in like a 3-year period. Embedded, like I've spent the week with them before the Eagles played them. One of them was the Doug Peterson guaranteed win week. That was fun. And so they have their coordinator availability like every team does, but their coordinator availability at that point was just, you got the 2 guys in the hallway, which is funny because the Star where they practice is about the size of like the Merc like drug plant. It's just massive, right? There's a helipad between the two buildings, between the regular building and the players building. And Jerry, it's so big, Jerry can land his chopper on the ground, on the turf between the two buildings. So they're having these press availabilities for the coordinators in the hallway for someone, which was very intimate. And you could like jump between the two and do whatever you needed to. Kellen Moore does not impress you in a press conference. So maybe that's one of the reasons we haven't had the, Kellen Moore introductory press conference.
Really? Okay.
And you know who's really good at press conferences? I always enjoyed him, was Brian Johnson.
Yeah, Brian was great. Yeah, very
well
thoughtful.
spoken.
Tried to answer questions as best, and that hurt him sometimes.
Yeah.
I love Brian Johnson. I think he's
Kellen,
still going to be a future head coach in this league.
Yeah, Kellen is not the guy, especially with so many things up in the air and so many sort of moving parts. And you've got a locker room issue that you've got a locker room concern that he's not aware of or familiar with because he hasn't been in it. You've got AJ Brown saying, it's a business, but I want to stay. You've got all these things up in the air that he's going to be asked about. Questions he literally can't answer.
By the way, AJ, I wanted to talk to two WIP guys. All right, I'll throw you. We kept you too long. Do you got to go, Marcus? I want to sneak in an AJ. AJ, it's not your fault, obviously, it's WIP guys, but it seems like an almost backwards type of thing in that they did a flippant poll, I think it was, at one time. Should the Eagles trade AJ Brown? Nothing more than that. But then it takes on a life of its own. Kay Adams puts it on her show. Should the Eagles trade AJ Brown? And AJ's there like, what are you talking about? I don't want to get traded. I don't want to get traded. Now it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Post June 1st, if you trade AJ Brown, you gain a little bit of salary cap space. Devontae Smith is going to get an extension soon. He's going to smartly wait for Justin Jefferson and CD Lamb to set the market. Rising tides raise all boats type of thing. He's going to get a heck of a lot of money. Is there some legs to this now? New England is a team that was looking to overpay Calvin Ridley. If they go quarterback in the first round, bang. I had heard from a little birdie that they had called Howie Roseman about AJ Brown. Could this develop into something post June 1st? They can't trade him before June 1st, but he's the type of player where teams will hold back budget money if they think they can get him. Any chance of that happening?
AJ Brown's been the best player on the team for 2 years.
I know. He's the best football player. Best football player they have.
Yes, and it's again not very close. So yeah, I can't imagine them considering trading AJ Brown. He's not a problem.
No,
he's
I
not
agree.
Nearly as big a distraction as we perceive him to be. He's a distraction and called himself a distraction, but he's not a problem. And the thing about AJ is his heart's in the right place. There are lots of diva wide receivers, and let's be honest, he's got 2 open signs on his locker. His social media handles is like one.
Always 1K, always open. Yeah.
He is not a shrinking violet, but his heart's in the right place. He works real hard. He wants everybody else to work hard, and he wants to win. But he's a young guy, and he's emotional, and he does things that can be perceived to be destructive. I don't think they're necessarily destructive. I don't think he's taken very seriously by most people in the locker room to that degree. You know what I'm saying? So no, I think that any consideration of trading AJ Brown is down the road when AJ Brown maybe wants a new deal and probably won't get it because he got $100 million for 5 years. That's one of those contracts I expect to play out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So no, I understand what you're saying. You run a poll like that, which I thought was kind of a silly poll. Like, who's going to say, yeah, trade AJ Brown?
Oh, they got him.
Yeah, a lot of
It,
people.
it wasn't 95-5. It was more like 60-40, Marcus.
Well,
You know, WIP listeners.
We
You know,
know what
WIP poll takers. They'll mix it up.
Yeah, we also know what 40% of the people do with the election polls. All right. So it's just a foolish thing to consider. It's a foolish question. And the fact that it got a life of its own is AJ Brown's fault. All he had to do was say, no, I want to stay here on the initial podcast. Was it the K? No, it was the initial podcast. Or was it the K Adams podcast?
Well, wherever K before he jumped on WIP, he called it
right.
WIP
himself.
Well, he was on with K first. K furthered the story.
Right. Yeah. All he has to say is, no, if they want to trade me, I don't want that to happen. I like being in Philadelphia. All right. But AJ's feelings got hurt by a radio station.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he said it's a business, implying that maybe he wants out. So, and then he went on WIP and said, no, I don't want out. But he was doing damage control to damage that he did.
That's true. That is very true. And here's how I would lay it out. And it's apropos because I think it's the same exact thing as I've been saying for 2 days about Justin Fields. Do you have to worry about submitting his contract? Yeah, legit. Does AJ get a little emotional, overreact? Yeah, a little bit. Is AJ and Hurts's relationship at times, I think, actually counterproductive? Yeah. What trumps it all? He's the best football player on the team. You don't trade the best football player on the team. Does 2 extra years of cheap quarterback play for Kenny Pickett help? Yes. Will there be a less of a disruption, if there's any, and I don't think there's really going to be any, of him looking over Jalen Hurts' shoulder as compared to Justin? Yes. What's the most important thing? You need the best football player as your backup, just in case Jalen Hurts breaks his leg and is out for 6 weeks. And Justin Fields is the better football player. End of discussion. Same thing for me.
I'm actually disappointed with you guys because you didn't bring
up the first time, Marcus.
You didn't bring up the whole looking over the shoulder thing, right?
Yeah, John and I did in the first segment. Sorry we didn't ask you about that. Give us your comment on that. Legit, what the hell are we talking about here? What do you think about the backup quarterback? Marcus Mariota came in. Everyone in the world knew he was a backup quarterback. He'd been a backup quarterback coming in. Is this an issue with the Eagles this year with Kenny Pickett?
Jalen Hurts, the only thing I like that Jalen Hurts says is that the rent is due every day. I really believe that he believes that he has to play well every snap in practice in order to justify keeping his job. I think that's a great attitude. Like every athlete should subscribe to that. And it's one of the things I think he really subscribes to. So I don't think Jalen Hurts ever looks over his shoulder. If any quarterback, any player is distracted by the presence of another player that they think they might lose their job to at some point, you need to trade that player. You are a bad teammate. You are a non-competitor. You are Carson Wentz.
He could be Kenny Pickett because he didn't want to compete in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Right. That I do not like that. I do not think Jalen Hurts lives that way. I think he lives. No. I think he looks over his shoulder every second. Like he's like, look, I got to keep going. I got to keep going, getting forward. The next guy is going to be great. That's his motivation. That's great. But if it's fear and if it detracts from you, if it affects your performance negatively, as it did Carson's, you need to get rid of that guy. And I don't care what position it's at. I don't care what sport it is. I don't care if it's, team poker, get rid of the person who's afraid they're going to lose.
Yeah. Brashness, as I called CJ Gardner-Johnson, is not necessarily a bad thing in professional sports. You should be brash. You should want to compete. You should think you're better, especially if you're a star player. And I agree with you, Jalen. By the way, why would anybody think anybody's looking over their shoulder? Maybe Carson Wentz. Kenny Pickett and Justin Fields haven't played well. Nobody's looking over their shoulder at those two guys.
I got to tell you, when the conversation about Carson Wentz being upset that they drafted Jalen Hurts, who was not a very good quarterback, like not a very good professional prospect quarterback, plug and play guy,
marginal,
that he was worried about Jalen Hurts being drafted in the second round in the same draft where Aaron Rodgers had Jordan Love drafted in the first round, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I mean, it was beyond I could not believe it. Utter disbelief. I totally dismissed that Carson Wentz would be worried about Jalen Hurts. And then he was.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what in the world is going on here? You're Carson Wentz. You just signed a $128 million contract. You just went to the Pro Bowl. You did this, you did that. They've totally mortgaged their future to accommodate you. Jalen Hurts is, was it Taysom Hill? When he was drafted.
Yeah, they were talking about two quarterbacks on the field at the same time. All the wacky spring stuff. Oh, maybe we can get them on the field at the same time. Yeah, it was crazy.
It just blew my mind. And, that's probably of all the many wrong things I've been wrong about, that's the wrongest I've ever been, that Carson Wentz was worried about Jalen Hurts. And I was not like a huge Carson Wentz guy. Like, I didn't think Carson Wentz was like this great leader, great character, whatever, but it just did not enter the realm of my possibilities that he would be worried about Jalen Hurts, who was a project quarterback,
All right, let's get out on this note, because Marcus, McMahon, and McDonald all agree. Don't sweat Jalen Hurts being nervous. That's not Jalen's bag. He doesn't do that. That's not going to be an issue. Marcus, great stuff. Always a pleasure when you come on. You're right. You got a good tan. Last time we asked him out, he told me, no, I'm going to Florida. He needs a good tan. Thank you very
much. I'm going back tomorrow.
Nice. Finish it up.
As you talk to two very.
You're not.
No, I'm not. Right. No, we're not. And we're going to be as Caucasian as we are right now when you come back. And
it was nice. It was nice for a couple of days. Now it's winter again.
I think you're
leaving at a perfect time.
Show off how pale you are.
Yeah.
Mark, it's always a pleasure. Thanks, bud. We'll get you up again.
Thanks, Marcus.
All right, guys.
Probably before the draft. We'll get Marcus Hayes back up with us here on Birds 365.
Wind him up and let him go. All right.
Marcus is always full of opinions. That's why we love him. All right. For all you out there looking to save a little money on your car insurance, have I got an option for you? Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% on the all-important car insurance right now. For one of JAKIB Sports' great partners, here's what you need to do. Call one of their two managing general partners, either Jim or Fran, and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.